Hey there, today we're going to be looking at some early thoughts on the format. We're just finishing up the first weekend, so we're starting to get some sense of maybe what the archetypes could look like and how that could affect draft and even gameplay. So just as a um, quick review, we can remember that this format is going to have some two-color and two-color splash decks, but because of all the domain synergies and just other synergies, plus all the lands at common and even at rare with the pain lands, many 3, 4, 5 color strategies exist as well. So keep in mind that this data is all aggregated. It's not granular. So when you see 3 color splash or 4 or 5 color, there are certainly decks that are performing very well. And I know higher up in the ladder, I'm facing a lot of these domain decks. 3, 4, 5 color that just have very strong late games, can grind well, can play kind of a controlling mid-range strategy. Just has some haymakers that are tough to do better than, but there also are some two-color strategies. So we're going to look at a few of the two-color decks, in particular the aggro side of things with like Boros and Izzet. And then we're going to look at the walls or defender archetype that seems to be performing very well. As long as you're the walls draft right at your table. And then we'll look at a couple of domain decks. Just give a sense of how the cards are performing and what's looking good. So I think I can zoom in a little bit here. So as you would imagine, with blue being spells and red being aggression, a way that this deck could work is by getting on the board early, with cards like Amplifier or Balmor, and then playing kind of a tempo game where you're balancing creatures, forcing creatures into bad blocks against your creatures, and then potentially being able to fly over for the last bits of damage, with like Talus Lookout, for example. I will say some of the cards in the sideboard that I maybe would have considered. I've liked Impulse a lot in this format, even in the kind of aggro decks, as a way to find what you're looking for and be another spell to proc your amplifiers, your battle mage, cards like that. But this player, who I think was around diamond, seems like they were able to leverage some of the 2-for-1s like the Talus Lookouts, the Clarion Geysers, the Phyrexian Espionage can even be a 3-for-1 sometimes, so they didn't have the black to kick it. To be able to push through, and then a lot of cheap interaction. These are 1-mana spells that are balancing or killing creatures, 2-mana spells countering or killing creatures, and then 1 to 3-mana spells that are kind of doing the same. Feels like a good strategy, but maybe it's not quite as good as we thought day one. You do have to kind of have the deck come together and get some of the uncommons, in particular like the Balmor. And then this one didn't have any Tolarian Terrors, the 7-drop that's 1 cheaper for each instant or sorcery in your graveyard, but that's a great home for these types of creatures. On the other side, and probably the stronger of the two aggro decks, is going to be red-white, and a lot of that's on the back of Keldon Strike Team, which is just performing very well, and then Captain's Call and Heroic Charge, hoping you go wide, and then pump up your creatures and maybe even give them trample as an overrun type effect. But again, there's good interaction. Cards like Take Up the Shield to keep some of your key creatures alive, and a lot of these are replaceable, but like the Torii, the Baird, or if you're fortunate enough to draft some real bombs like an Archangel of Wrath, those aren't as replaceable, so having Take Up the Shield can help keep the creature alive, and if it's in combat, give it lifelink so that you make racing tougher. Then also we're looking at a lot of 2-for-1s like the Cavalier, Captain's Call. Potentially Take Up the Shield can trade and block a removal spell or a combat trick if they were trying to get you with that. So this is not the most streamlined red-white, and I'm not sure what maybe they could have added in. Maybe they could have considered like another Griffin Protector or even this Amplifier, because they had enough spells to be able to have that come down on 2 and push through damage. I probably would have done that. But they wanted to be a little more mid-range. So this can lean into more aggro. I'm going to look at an aggro version. We could probably even look at it right now. This is my first trophy of the format. And I chose to splash green as well. And it was more on the back of Czar. But I wanted to try out Queen Alanol. But Czar has a place in a deck that has Enlisters. So you can tap in and potentially pup your whole team if you have 3 different land types out. Which oftentimes you're going to have your red, white, and then the green for the splash. So it's a natural home with Enlist. And then going wide with the Captain's Calls, the Cavaliers, Bear to pump out tokens, Failings to be cheap, and then pumping with Heroic Charge or having Griffin Protector, be larger in the air when you play a Captain's Call, pre-combat, give you some creatures, Giant Growth, or Griffin Protector. And this one, in terms of like bombs, it did have a Planeswalker, but beyond that, it was a lot of just, strong cards on a plan, very synergistic. And that does seem to be a big focus for this format. So if you're not going aggro, probably one of the 2 most defensive controlling strategies is the Walls or Defender deck. And a lot of that is on the back on Wingmantle Chaplain, which has just been a huge overperformer. If we're looking at, again, these are very early data, so grain of salt and everything. But if we're looking at across all cards, we're going to see Wingmantle Chaplain, even third with a pretty preposterous game and rate of 67%. Ahead of cards like the Flying Factor Fiction, for example, or tap 7, make 4 or 5 3/3 beasts. So a lot of that is pointing to the synergy-driven aspect of the format. So when we go back to the deck, we can see here this person had a game plan, and it was get on board early, with some walls on 1 and 2. Potentially something that discourages attacks like a first striker on 2 as well. And then, bounce creatures or get card advantage so that you can find your walls, make a lot of 1/1s, and send them in. Seems like a good plan. Probably worked very well for them. Also, if really need be, they didn't have any of the 05 Academy wall, but if they did, that's a great card with Walking Bulwark to turn it into a 5/5, which can be big game. But they had counters which are playing well in this format because there are some more expensive cards that people are trying to play, and even just some of the aggro strategies that are trying to tap out each turn. You can get them with whether it's an Essence Scatter or like a Protect Negotiators. But a deck like this that's making tokens, Wrath is probably really home here, because you can play your counter or end a turn. If they had an Impulse, that would have been great. But just play some instants, counters or card draw, tap some of your birds maybe that you just made, or back on defense to draw a card and just keep the pressure on. And then I think the Domain deck is one that I had hopes for, but wasn't sure if it was really going to get there. But this is an example in our trophy deck where their top end is a 5-mana 10/10, for example, that they can help ramp to with cards like Weatherseed Tree, which I think is just fantastic in this format. And they can get back their bombs, like Herborg Repossession, which is great to get these back, or another Archangel of Wrath. And then they're able to play a lot of good interaction spells when you're in 3 to 5 colors. Like Chair Thunder becomes exile anything, Geyser, Bite Down, Destroy Evils. Even Artillery Blast is a 2-mana deal 6 to something that's attacking you, as long as it doesn't have Vigilance. Probably my favorite uncommon in the set is this Neshoba Brawler, which can be a 2-mana, 4 or 5/3 trample. as early as turn 2 or 3. But it's a deck that tries to leverage some of the better cards. Mixed with a lot of these tap lands. So you have to understand you're not going to be, generally speaking, aggressive. You're going to be mid-range to controlling. You're going to try and play cards that are above rate because you're able to fix your mana. I will say, potentially they could have put some Gaia's Mites, which I found to just be fantastic in this deck, especially when you have, some Tramplers. So like Moss Spirit Agent is nice, but even the Brawler as well. But yeah, I mean, you see they're able to play a lot of cards that you'd be happy to first pick, like the Agent, the Wrath, the Green Widow, Treaty, a lot of removal spells. So I'll say I had a couple other trophy decks that were Domain that I felt just really did it. So this one was actually more on the mid-range game plan. It was really more 3-color, but this one was able to take advantage of so many just cheap interaction spells and then digging for what you wanted or needed. So like being able to dig with Impulse, Shadow Prophecy, Prodigies was huge. Being able to interact with, kicked Runner's Vortexes, kicked Tribute to Urborgs, Tail Swipe, anytime interferences was good. And at that point, I mean, the creatures on 2 is what really mattered. Like, this is replaceable. That's kind of replaceable too. I just didn't have much else that maybe would have gone in there, which is fine. But this was just about putting pressure on. So this was a more like aggro mid-range version of the deck. But we'll look at this last one that was true, 5-color goodness. And this just, this was a silly deck where we're able to say, okay, we've got a good number of lands. What's this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the tap lands, plus a Weather Seed Treaty to find any color but white. And white was really in there just to try and be able to nug them for 5 with a Mary's Outrider, or draw a card with Nail, or have this Miro be a 10/10. But I mean, this deck just played up, the Brawler and the Root Wall so strong in domain strategies. Tatiova was great because you're able to get to the late game. And then we had a package of Micromancer with 6 different 1-drops to find, including oftentimes Urborg Repossession to bring back the Micromancer to get another one of these. But this was about, stabilizing, ramping, and then getting to, 8/8 or 10/10s, some bringing a creature back, and everything other than the Agent would oftentimes just come back into play because you'd have 4 or 5 of the lands. You could like bring back your Micromancer to get another 1-drop to get a 3-for-1 with your board to, bring back the Marrow, bring back Battle Riders to deal 4 or 5 to the face. Like, this was about leveraging the flexibility of the lands and enough good defensive speed of like a 3/3 for 3 is fine when you're just wanting it to be able to block anything. 1/3 to fix mana, Brawler to be able to block and bring back later. And then enough good interaction. So I'd say those are, generally speaking, the initial decks in the format. There's others that are performing well. Like, we could have looked at like a green-white, for example, and that's just going white with tokens and oftentimes splashing another color. But the format looks exciting. The drafts are really dynamic. The decks can lead to some really unique, interesting gameplay. So yeah, I hope you're enjoying it, and I'm happy to chat more about it.